Welcome back, students, and a very good morning to all. So, this is our second class on George Lamming's essay, The Occasion for Speaking. And in our previous class, we had discussed the concept of exile, as you all know, and the reasons for being an exile among these African Caribbean writers. And we had concluded our first session by a remark made by Lamming that the West Indian writers they have to cut down their colonial self. Only then they are able to liberate themselves psychologically from the clutches of colonialism. Okay. Now we are moving to the next section of the essay, where he continues by speaking that how this colonial seed works in the mind of the West African writer. Okay, so he says this colonial seed, it is the reason for the West African writers' departure from the very landscape which is the raw material of all their books. Usually, the West African writer's raw material, it is from his own native island, his own native Caribbean islands, from where he usually takes his writing material. But because of this colonial seed, which was ingrained in the mind of in the psychology of the West African writer, the West African writer lacks the confidence. So he tries to escape from the familiar landscape, that is his own native colonial island, usually which serves as the raw material for their books. And it is the case of the West African writer and the West African reader as well. That is, these West African writers, they always wants to be in an exile in Britain. And usually the West African reader also believed that their reading, it was molded by the sacred gang, including Dickens, Jane Austen, Kipling, etc. Okay. Here, Lamming says about the colonial seed in the mind of the West African writer and the West African reader. So they all escape from their familiar landscape to British or Britain in order to develop a good reading taste. Okay. And now he is talking about the West Indians' education, which was also imported from Britain. So of course there was a cultural negotiation between England and the natives. England had naturally acquired the divine right in order to organize the natives' reading. That is, always it is to be expected that England's export of literature would be English. So that is basically the concept. And it was deliberately and exclusively English. And the Trinidadian futures in civil service, it was purposefully it imposed Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Jane Austen and George Eliot, etc. So that was the England's export of literature would be English in West Indian islands. Okay. And in the next section, he is talking about the African American novelist James Baldwin. And James Baldwin, in his essay on Notes of a Native Son, he tries to examine and interpret his own situation as an American Negro. How, as an American Negro, he felt as an exile, etc. So he says in the essay itself, I quote, I was a kind of bastard of the West. Okay, he explains his own situation as an American Negro writer living in Britain. And he says, these were not really my creations about his books. They did not contain my history. I was only an interloper. I had certainly been unfitted for this jungle or tribe. So he is quite experiences a sort of identity crisis. He did not know whether he is a person from this jungle or this tribe or a person from living in Britain. So a sort of a sort of identity crisis. And in the next slide, he quotes about German philosopher Hegel. That is Hegel here having the last word on Africa in his introduction to the philosophy of history. Hegel in his book on the introduction to the philosophy of history, and he says, it's a quote from the text itself, he says, Africa proper, as far as history goes back, has remained the land of childhood, and the Negro, as already observed, exhibits the natural man in his completely wild and untamed state. So Hegel's understanding of history, so of course it is taken as an undisputed European view. Hegel is speaking about Africa. Of course Hegel is speaking from the premise on which the story of every other nation is based. That is, thus Europe here remains as the center around which all other cultures only evolve without their own independent existence. That is, according to the view of German philosopher Hegel, Europe is the center of every knowledge. No other nation, especially this third world nation, they do not have an existence or independence of their own. So Hegel basically here represents the European consciousness as sort of Euro-egoism is revealed through the words of Hegel, or a sort of Eurocentrism. His concentration or his attitude is fully centered on Europe, and it is a kind of false confidence which Hegel represents in the European consciousness. Okay, and it is for this what called disqualifies African man from Hegel's world of history. It is apparent incapacity to evolve with the logic of language, which is the only aid man has in capturing the idea. So Hegel here says that these African or Caribbean writers, they did not have a common language of their own. Of course there are certain native languages there, but with that native languages they are not able to communicate to the external world, and it is what disqualifies the African or this Caribbean man from Hegel's world of history. That is, the apparent incapacity to evolve with the logic of language. That is, the logic of language which is the only aid a man has in capturing this idea. Okay. Now, the West Indians history and colonialism. Here he is talking about the West Indian history and colonialism. That is, here he says colonialism is the very base and structure of the West Indian cultural awareness. And his reluctance in asking for a complete political freedom is due to the fear that he has never had to stand. Always these West Indian people, they are unable to stand by themselves. Then he is reluctant to ask for complete political freedom because he fears that he has never had to stand by himself. Always, even after getting this freedom, this foreign or absent mother culture has always cradled his judgment. His decisions making, it was always controlled by this absent foreign mother culture. And freedom from the physical fear has created a state of complacency in the West Indian awareness. Now they are free from the West, but that freedom itself gave them a state of complacency, freedom from physical fear. We are free now. That awareness itself has given a state of complacency, a state of happiness in the West Indian awareness. And higher they go up in this in the social scale, the more crippled his mind and impulses. They are now very weak. They lack the courage by standing themselves. They are not able to stand by themselves, or they lack the courage to stand by themselves. They always depend upon for their things to do on the Western culture. It has become a routine in their life. Okay. Now, here he says about three important events in British Caribbean history. Three important events, and he says the first event is discovery, and the second is abolition of slavery and the arrival of the East. That is arrival of the East meaning India, China, etc. in the Caribbean Sea. And the third is the discovery of the novel by West Indians as a way of investigating and projecting the inner experiences of the West Indian community. That is three important events in British Caribbean history. I will say once more. That is, the first incident is discovery. Discovery in the sense that the discovery of discovery by Columbus, Christopher Columbus. It is as a historical event. History. It is a creation of a situation which offers many antagonistic oppositions and a challenge of survival. That is, the first event is discovery in the sense that it is a journey to inside, or a journey out and a journey across. Of course, here he says by the example of Christopher Columbus. And the second one, it is the abolition of slavery and the arrival of the East in the Caribbean Sea. That was the second incident. And the third is the novel by West Indians as an investigation or a projection of the inner experiences of the West Indian community. These are the three major or important events in the British history or the British Caribbean history. Now, here Laming writes that the West Indian of average opportunity and intelligence has not yet been converted to reading as a civilized activity or an activity that justifies itself in the exercise of his mind. So what is a major problem encountered by West Indian writer? Because in West Indian of average opportunity and intelligence, they have not been converted to reading. For them, reading is not a civilized activity or an activity of the mind. Of course, reading is there. It is largely for reading for examinations. In recent times, the political fever has swarmed us to the newspapers with their generous and diabolical welcome to join the correspondence call. Of course, they read newspapers, especially in order to know the political fever of the time, especially the devilish activity, that is, or the devilish things related to politics. So, of course, they join the political columns of newspapers, but still they never conceive or consider reading as an activity of the mind. So, in book reading has never been a serious business in West Indian readers. So, they never conceive book reading as a serious activity or a serious business. Okay, now Laming says about then West Indian language. West Indian language in the sense that an important question for the English critic is not what the West Indian novel has brought to English writing, because English or the British writing, they have a very serious tradition of their own. So here Laming is not serious about what the West Indian novel has brought to English writing. Or it would be more correct to ask what the West Indian novelists have contributed to English reading, what they get as to the English readers. And English is a West Indian language, and he says, and in spite of the unfamiliarity of its rhythms, it remains accessible to the readers of English anywhere in the world. So here he says that English, just like any other language, English is a West Indian language. In spite of maybe the West Indian man may not be familiar with the rhythms, English rhythms, but still English remains accessible to the readers anywhere in the world. Then the West Indian contribution to reading, English reading, it has been made possible by their relation to the themes which are peasant. So the West Indian contribution to English reading, it has been made possible by the themes, the peasant themes, and it is a great difference between the West Indian novelist and his contemporary England. So of course there is a great difference between the West Indian novelist's way of writing in English and his contemporary writer in English, because peasants simply don't respond and see like middle class people. the peasant rhythms. Or peasants themselves, they may not be respond and see like the middle class people. The peasant tongue has its own rhythms, which are we can say in Trinidadian novelist Samuel Selwyn and Barbadian novelist Rates rhythms, and no artifice of technique. It is not at all sophisticated. You cannot find any sophisticated gimmicks which may mutilate, which may disturb the form. They can achieve the specific taste and sound of Selwyn's prose. That is, they are writing in a way that a native writer, West Indian writer writing in English. Of course, they have their own way of writing in the sense that they are writing for the peasants or for the low middle class people of the time, and their writing represent the peasant tongue or the rhythm, which you may not find in the contemporary England writer of the day. And for the way of conclusion, I am saying, so of course there is a dilemma of the West African or West Indian writer abroad. So in the concluding part of the essay, Laming says that there is of course a dilemma which was faced by the West Indian writer abroad, living as an exile. That is, he hungers for nourishment from a soil which he could not at present endure. So he always thirsts for a sort of nourishment from his native soil. At present he is not getting that. So that may be one reason why he is getting migrated to England. And the pleasure and paradox of my exile is that I belong wherever I am. So he himself says that it is the pleasure, and at the same time you take it as a paradox. It is, I am now living as an exile in Britain and it gave me a sort of pleasure, but at the same time I want to get some nourishment from my native soil. So it is a pleasure and paradox of my own exile. And Laming says that it is a condition of many of the West Indian writers of the time. They all want to get a sort of nourishment from their native soil, and at the same time they are getting that nourishment from Britain. So they want to be at Britain too. Then Laming reveals how this confidence in the authority of his own literary discourse, it of course increasingly wavers. So this is a wavering attitude, whether I want to be my native land or I want to be at Britain. So this is a sort of a wavering attitude, even as he points how a new post-colonial Caribbean literature might find an occasion for speaking. Of course, we need a platform for speaking. We are now in a wavering pedestal. Our literary discourse is increasingly wavering now. And he says that, so this is a condition of a post-colonial Caribbean writer. And of course, he says that this post-colonial Caribbean literature, of course, might find an occasion for speaking. That is why he concludes the essay. Okay. Now, summing up of important points, this essay, the occasion for speaking, Laming rationalizes his decision that of the West Indian writers, that is, he is standing for the West Indian exiled writers, that is, they to leave his home country and to move to England. So he finds out certain reasons why we all migrated to, or we are living as exiles in Britain. So that is what he generally speaks about in his essay in Occasion for Speaking. That is, there is a rationalization from his part why they migrated to England. The second point, Laming explains that the cultural climate of the British colonial islands, it was not suited to cultural production. So now, if they were in these British colonial islands or in West Indian islands, the cultural climate of these islands, it was not suited to cultural production. It was not suited to writing or any sort of literary production. And that London provided an environment more accommodating to literary minds. So that is the reason, because as writers, they want enough publishers, they want translators, etc. Of course, their native island did not give them that for their writing. So they all migrated to London. And London, of course, it gave them as an environment for cultural production, or they are able to accommodate these literary minds. Okay. Then, third point, the essay examines how he positioned himself and his writing in relation to colonial power and the decolonization struggles that characterized the passage to post-coloniality. So he finds a sort of, or he positioned how I stand myself in this stage, his writing to post-colonial power. So that's already explained in the previous point, that is our native island or native British colonial islands, it was not suitable for cultural production, so we all migrated to Britain, which was more accommodating to literary minds. And the fourth point is that by associating his work with anti-colonial struggle, he gained a legitimate voice in the Caribbean public sphere. So even though he was living as an exile, he associated himself with anti-colonial struggle, and by associating his work with this anti-colonial struggle, he gained a legitimate, authentic voice in the Caribbean public sphere. And lastly, at the same time, he says, in writing on the cusp of decolonization, he confronts the coming of post-coloniality as a world in which the writer's role is somewhat unclear. So he says that as a writer, as a post-colonial writer, my role is quite unclear. It is somewhat fluid. I cannot locate myself in this or that, because it is a position in the age of decolonization of a writer. And uncertain how to forge a new heroic literary project after independence, Lamming reveals how his confidence in the authority of their own literary discourse increasingly wavers. So his confidence in the authority of their own literary discourse is wavering. So I cannot position myself in here or there, as an exile in Britain or in my own native island, even as he points towards a new post-colonial Caribbean literature that might find an occasion for speaking. That is, to a great extent, he did not know whether I belong to native islands or I belong to Britain. Even if he says that we need an occasion for, or we want a place for an occasion for speaking, he believed that his discourse is increasingly wavering, because he points that this post-colonial Caribbean literature might find an occasion for speaking. So thus we come to the end of the essay, and if you have any queries or doubts regarding the topic, you can call me, and please go through the points very seriously, and please take down the printout copies of the text also, so that you can go through the text very well. Thank you for joining me. Thank you.
ക്ലിക്ക് ചെയ്യുക. ഇവിടെ റെക്കോർഡിംഗ് എന്നുള്ളത് ക്ലിക്ക് ചെയ്യുക. സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ആവും.